Hey, everybody, welcome back to Mike and the Doc. I'm Mike.
And I'm the Doc. And today we're going to be talking about a real hot topic. We're talking about vaccines. Oh, my God. Oh, man. Everybody's got an attitude on vaccines. Whether you're pro-vax, anti-vax, we'll talk about it and kind of see.
We're glad you're with us, and we hope you learned something along the way.
Okay, so Mike, vaccines, super hot topic. I'm medical. You're medical also, but I just feel like I'm curious what, the public feels about vaccines, COVID. Oh, man.
Very good question, and this is, like you said, been a hot topic. I myself, I would categorize myself as a pro-vaccine. However, like we were talking about, the COVID vaccine, I could see somebody's opinion of not taking that. Maybe after the first one, I think the first vaccine was almost like a must for me because I was trying to prevent from getting further COVID. I had COVID myself. I was locked in the house for like 30 days and terrible fever. So it was the real deal in my opinion. So every time I take a COVID vaccine, every time. I also take a flu vaccine each time. What's funny about that is I always get the flu, but I know from talking to doctors like yourself, it's much lighter than what I would have if I had no vaccine. And I remember getting the flu when I didn't get vaccinated, and I just remember thinking I wasn't going to turn the corner. And then day 5 or 6, you would resurrect from the bed. And so I'm glad we have those vaccines. And then to the ones that children get, I'm just thinking of the measles vaccine and maybe you would know a little bit more, probably the hepatitis vaccines. I think those are a must to prevent against just turning into an outbreak later on, and the initial years when you're trying to get into school. I was thinking about that, how an outbreak may prevent you from getting into school early on. But anyhow, I'm talking too much. That's probably
No, I'm always curious what people think. Yeah.
So that's my stance. And how about you, Doc? I'm sure you're front and center.
Well, it's oh man, it's a huge topic. How much time we got? Okay, so as far as vaccinations, it's kind of a forced play on me. There was a point when you're in Vegas, you really had to have a really good reason not to get the COVID vaccine. I think I had gotten mine one of the first rounds who had gotten it. I'm very pro-vaccine. So you talked about two things. You talked about COVID, and then you talked about the rest, right? Really, there's COVID because that's right front and center, as you were saying, and there's everything else, right? Measles, mumps, rubella, polio. I mean, it's interesting because if you had asked me during the pandemic, I was extremely pro-vaccine. We did see a lot of people die. Just to kind of drive the point home, there was this one ER doctor who I actually met out and about. She's moving to Florida, but I think her mother and her husband's father, okay, both died from COVID, okay, and there were people like there was one person that I admitted. I won't say which hospital, but there was there was a patient that I admitted who was so anti-vaccine. Oh, not the patient. It was the patient's daughter that was anti-vaccine. And everything about that patient that I admitted looked like they would benefit from the vaccine. But the daughter of the patient didn't want it. I don't know whether the patient passed away because I just admitted them, but it looked like they were going to pass away pretty imminently. So basically, it depends on a case by case basis. You're really looking at the benefit of, there's this thing called herd immunity, as well as just your own specific case. So let me talk about my specific case. We were very like social distancing. We didn't. I have a family of 5, as you know, and so my wife didn't visit her parents because of getting on the plane. Also, my son was very young at the time, and he could not have been vaccinated. And which gets me to the really fun part, not fun part of the story, but a part of the story anyway, is we were very social distancing. And then when I went to the hospital, I wore the whole get up. So like the PAPR, the motorcycle helmet, the hose. I even switched from rounding on the floors because they wouldn't let you wear PAPRs on the floor. I switched to just rounding or admitting in the ER. That's why I did the admission shifts, is because in the ER, there was no rule about whether you could or could not wear the PAPR. And there was initially, but then all the ER docs were like, well, if you don't let us wear PAPRs, then we're not staying. Is kind of what they said. So I was very social distancing. I was very pro social distancing. And but then now let's get to when we actually got it.
Were you scared in the beginning of COVID and having to wear that? Was it? Were you fearful?
Oh man, yeah, I was fearful. I had, like, if we look back in history, right? Like, let's just take it forward, right? If you ask a child who's born today, like when they're 20, and you say to them, hey, listen, can you believe that they shut down the Strip, the Las Vegas Strip? They'll be like, no, we didn't shut down the Strip. Or if you ask them and say, you had to stand like 10 feet or whatever it was behind the next guy, and you had to wait in line to get into Costco, they'd be like, no, that didn't happen. It was super scary. And the market, as you know, just tanked. That March 2020, holy smokes! When I do a little bit of trading, and they call those like black swan events, and everybody tries to model like, what are you going to do if there's a black swan event? And that's one of the black swan events. But yeah, the whole world was scared, I had colleagues that had gotten it. So I had the other thing is what I was thinking in my brain is, I have to go to work to pay the bills, right? But if I get this, then, it could be bad. And so I was thinking the next time this happens, and it may happen again, like really what we're talking about is there's, when you get the flu vaccine, okay, you get the flu vaccine, there's what's called like an antigenic drift, okay? Let's just say this is the antigen, right? Antigenic drift is like this, like a little bit of a change, right? What happened this time, because there's coronavirus everywhere. Coronavirus has been affecting kids forever. But COVID-19, so let's just say this is coronavirus, and then 1 year it drifts, right? Well, this time it shifted, much different than its predecessors.
Interesting.
And that's why we didn't have the antibodies for it. And so that's why it was a big deal. But when there is another antigenic or a COVID shift, like I don't even want to say COVID, plug in whatever year you want to put, right? Then I hope that I'm not like having to go back to work, because there are people that I knew that were like, that were internal medicine or hospitalists, and they were like, pushing 60, pushing 70, and some of them got it. Some of them had like collapsed lungs.
Wow.
A couple of docs died. So yeah, I was scared of it, but I'm not like super elderly. I'm not super young. I was really afraid for my son, who had meconium aspiration. If you guys saw the previous episodes, he had meconium aspiration. He couldn't get vaccinated. And what was funny is we were so good. We were right there, okay? And then the only people like in our sphere at that time was really just my family, like us 5, and our nanny. And our nanny got it working another job.
Oh,
And then we got it. And so we didn't love that, but we all got it. I had been vaccinated. The girls had been vaccinated. And of course, Leah was vaccinated. But Abe was not. And it's funny, Abe didn't do so poorly. He actually did. No one had to go to the hospital. But to your point, I think my oldest daughter, because she's kind of like, she kind of has like a tendency towards like respiratory stuff, right? Like kind of pro-inflammatory. Like I think we were giving her so much Tylenol to bring that fever down, and that was with her vaccinated. So I think if she hadn't gotten vaccinated, I think she would have went to the hospital. I don't think anybody would have died, but they would have gone to the hospital. So if you ask me about COVID and getting vaccinated, I'm very pro-vaccine. Then there's like the herd immunity and all this, right? So
I remember hearing about those parties.
yeah, like
People having
remember the chickenpox parties?
I think so.
Oh my God! If you have chickenpox, go have a party, get everybody
Right.
infected.
Yeah.
The thing is like, this is the other thing is if I'm like 20, and I know if I get COVID, I'm going to be fine. Number one, there were obese, and this is terrible, but obese African American 20-year-olds who died from COVID, like straight up, they died from COVID. But for the most part, younger people did okay with it. And then if you're immunosuppressed, if you're really, really old, really, really young, you didn't do well with it. And then it comes to, this is not just about us, right? It's not just about my family. It's about what am I doing for the community as a whole. So yeah, if I, like I said, like if I go and I get it, I'm going to be just fine, right? But if it's out there, then there are people who are, older than me, younger than me, immunosuppressed, whatever. If it's out there, the herd immunity is still better for everyone overall, is my personal opinion. Now, because we could get super, like you could get super selfish and say, well, I'm not going to get vaccinated because I'm not going to be affected. But then you're possibly the people that you herd with, if they're old or young, they could get sick. So then it comes down to, well, what are you doing for the community as a whole? So I'm very pro-vaccine when it comes to that. And then
I have a question. This is Trevor. I'm the off-screen producer. Hello, this is my introduction to the show. But I have a question. So if people that aren't at risk are getting vaccinated, it's not really doing anything but to help the general public and everything like that. But if the older person or the more at-risk person is vaccinated as well, is it really beneficial that both parties get vaccinated? Or is there a scenario where the person not at risk, it wouldn't matter if they are or are not vaccinated as long as the at-risk people are vaccinated?
I think we have and again, this is just my opinion. I think we have an obligation as to if we are in that group that is quote unquote privileged, meaning like if you take me, for example, maybe if I get COVID, nothing's going to happen. Like I had like a low grade temp for like 24 hours, right? So it's like whatever for me. But I was vaccinated, so I don't know what I don't think I would have been hospitalized, what I'm saying.
You didn't get COVID prior to the vaccines.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got vaccinated first, then I got COVID. So
And that's interesting, right?
yeah, no, I mean, I think and getting back to your point is if you get the COVID vaccine, it's not that you're not, I mean, if you're really lucky, nothing, but I had like a low grade temp. To give you an idea, like when we looked at our, because we had the at-home tests, mine was like faintly like pink and my son's was like straight up like a red bar. Like he had it like hands down.
Wow.
But I think what I would say is like maybe another way to look at this, because we're talking about health care, right? Is you and I both pay tax, right? So we're getting into a little bit of
Too much.
Yeah, we pay. Agreed. So and this is getting into a really hot topic, right? So I pay tax, you pay tax, and there are people that are less privileged that benefit from our taxation, right? I don't drive on the road 3 times more than another person who takes their kids to school, but you bet your ass that I'm paying 3 times or even more than 4 times the amount of tax. So you see that I don't love that, but I can understand that we need to take care of the outliers in the community or in the society. So it really is like I know with COVID, it's like, well, if it's not going to affect me, why? But you know what? If it's not going to affect me, because my kids aren't all in private school, but let's just say they were, why do I need to pay into the tax that helps with schools, right? My kids aren't affected, but that's not my opinion. My opinion is we need to help with the public school system, right? Because I live in a community where I'm surrounded by people who are less fortunate. So I think that's how I'd probably answer it. But to your point, somebody who is like just from like rate of spread, I think you're right. I think that it probably wouldn't move the needle, other than maybe time off of work. And there are people that, like, sometimes you don't even know that you're immunosuppressed, right? Sometimes you don't even know that you have asthma or COPD or whatever any of these things are, right? And like I was saying, a lot of young people. There were a ton of young people in the hospital, but I will say the majority were kind of like they were obese, and a lot of people died. A lot of young people died, but certainly more older, and the younger kids died.
This is jogging a lot of memories because over at Connolly Care Home Health, that's what we treat, is normally the Medicare traditional patient 65 and older.
Yeah.
And I think we treated the most COVID in town because we were kind of a newer company.
Yeah.
So that was like the work at the time. So I was so proud of the team, but I was just remembering back on how fearful the first couple of patients were. And we have some older nurses who went the whole way, obviously with the N95 mask, but they treated handfuls of patients and never got COVID, or maybe went out one time. The thing I was also remembering how hard it was to get those masks.
Oh man,
the N95, and I think the real deal was the 3M N95. You couldn't find it. It was like
those guys that sold those things on Amazon. Oh my God, they're not working today. They're not at work today.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting the masks was an issue. Oh man, what a crazy time.
I remember we had, I think it was the first patient we treated, and the hospital gave us a mask because I couldn't find them, and we went in and treated the patient. And the patient threw away the mask. And that was supposed to be for them for like a couple of days.
Oh, yeah.
And so just, you didn't have any idea what to do. It was, I'm sure even for yourself, who's been in medicine a long time, it was like a PhD in, I don't know, pandemic or widespread medicine.
Yeah. Oh, it was so crazy. I think my kids will be able to tell their kids about how crazy it was, because it'll be talked about later in history.
And was it similar in your mind to the Spanish flu? Was it identical?
If you think about it, it could have been okay. So they were talking about if you have really bad disease, right? And you affect enough people, you will go on the ventilator. Yeah, if you have enough people on ventilators, well, you need people to manage the ventilators. And then you need people who are, let's say you're an eye doctor, right? Well, they were trying to train people who are eye doctors who haven't intubated a patient in 1,000 years. They were trying to train them to get good at this sort of thing. They did it more in like Italy and stuff. But yeah, it was a wild time, man. I I don't miss it. I remember getting ready for work. So I'd go to work, put on all my gear, and then you'd finish your shift. And then, okay, the time it took for me to I had to spray down my helmet, my hose, the papper itself, throw that in the trunk, and then drive home. And then I would strip down to my underwear, and then and then I'd put it in a laundry basket outside the house, and then I'd walk in my underwear. Yeah. I remember one time.
I remember those times.
And the reason it evolved to that, because it wasn't always like that, is because I remember I don't know if it was in the summer, if the weather was good, and I was in a real kind of a shady part of town, and I was stripping down right behind my car.
Sure.
And I remember this car came up behind me, and he just stopped, and I was like, oh my God, I am totally exposed. I had my t-shirt on and my underwear on. And I had my regular, my clogs for work. But I remember thinking, okay, maybe I need to do this at home. And so what happens is when you sit in your seat is contaminated. So when you get home, you have to take off all your stuff, and then I'd have to spray down just the driver's seat. And then we barely use my car. The kids almost never use my car. Yeah, it was a wild time.
What were you using to spray it down? What was the best product?
I just used ethyl alcohol.
Ethyl alcohol.
Yeah, ethyl alcohol in a spray bottle.
Wow.
Let's see. Yeah, it was a wild time. And then obviously people even in here, I think we have differing opinions, right? But my family members and my wife's family members, different opinions, right? So some were whatever. Some were okay, we're going to be really strict about it. And it caused a lot of, stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was bedlam.
Yeah. and
that.
I guess my thing is go forward in history, right? I think when you go forward in history and you ask children, right, you say, hey, okay, no religion, no politics. I'll do one thing from religion, okay? When you hear about all the crazy stuff they did to some of these prophets, right? And they say, oh yeah, they ridiculed them and they threw rocks at them or whatever the case may be. You think to yourself, oh my God, that's terrible. That would never have happened in our time, right? But then let's just say we go forward 50 years, right? They'll ask the kids, they'll say, hey, listen, people had the choice to do the vaccine or not. And then they'll be like, oh, well, it must have cost an arm and a leg. No, it didn't. It was free.
Right.
Okay. Or they'll say, oh, well, they didn't have the data. They didn't have enough time to run it through. I mean, there's some wiggle room on that. But I think Trump, who I don't know if he's anti-vax or vax, I won't even go there. But I think he really helped push it through. So kudos to him for that.
I was just thinking of that, how quickly the vaccine was made and delivered.
Yeah.
I was very impressed with that.
And
I actually have a question about that. That was a good point.
Yeah.
So I read, correct me if I'm wrong, but I hear from clinical trials, studies, all that kind of stuff, the average time for a vaccine to get to market is 12 years.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And the COVID vaccine seemingly was less than 12 months.
Oh, yeah.
It was super fast, right? So was there an inherent risk that they took by pushing the vaccine through so long, or why were we able to get that vaccine to market so much faster than a typical, 1/12 of the time?
It's true. There's definitely so there are risks with vaccines, right? You actually bring up a good point, and I think let's take the benefit to the person or the benefit to the community, right? So if I don't know what the stat is, maybe we can look it up, but if you look at how many people died from COVID, right? Worldwide, and we're all taking planes, right?
Right.
So worldwide, the death toll from COVID is magnanimous, right? So if there is an inherent risk, right? Let's just say injection site redness, or let's just say you get a little bit of a runny nose, or whatever it may be, right? Those are considered risks, right? And when you have a vaccine and you have a drug company that's making these vaccines, they really got to follow the rule. Like, don't get me wrong, drug companies make buku dollars, right? But they really have to fall in line with these different, what's the side effect profile? What happened to this? What happened to that? That's why for vaccines under 5, it took so long. So my boy was not old enough to get vaccinated before he got it. So I think what it is you got to look at, okay, what are the risks, right? And I think that gets back to why it was pushed through, is you have this basically worldwide event, right? And what is the benefit and what is the risk? So there's I won't say what her name is, but there was a celebrity whose child may have had some sort of reaction to a vaccine, okay? And I think this was before COVID, but I think that it's terrible that that child got the side effect, but we're talking about like a really small number. Now, to that family, it's 100%. But overall, like when you think of what's the risk to the world or the community versus the benefit, right? Like it's true. Let's just say I got COVID vaccine and I got Guillain-Barré, right? That would have been terrible, right? That's like an ascending neurologic deficit kind of thing for those who don't understand. That would have been terrible for me. It would have been terrible for my family. And to us, the incidence is 100%. But overall, let's just say it happens to 1 in 100,000 people, and then you take the population of the U.S., right? So if the population of I'm just trying to make the numbers easy. So if you have 1 in 100,000, and 100,000 goes into a million 10 times, right? And then there's 300 million people, say. So 30 times. So if you have an incidence of 1 in 100,000 people and 30 people get a bad side effect in the whole United States, it's sad, and it's even more sad if it happens to a child. But overall, we got to look at the overall big picture, and it's still of benefit to the masses, is I guess what I say. Like, not to get too nerdy, but like if you talk about Star Trek, Spock always says the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Okay, not to quote Star Trek, but that's I think what we're talking about here is what is the inherent risk to the community versus the benefit. The benefit is that after the vaccine was given, less people got symptomatic COVID or bad COVID. And again, I'm not like pro drug company. Like, believe me, like they've done some shady stuff. But I think that was a really good thing. And the fact that they pushed it through, and there was side effects. But I think that overall the benefit to the community, the world, et cetera, I think was good.
I was just thinking of all the drug commercials where they list all the side effects.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't probably take 100% of them sometimes, but they have to list them. So I was just thinking of all the wild side effects I hear.
Right?
Right.
Remember Pfizer? And you remember the big one for Pfizer, right?
No.
The Pfizer was Viagra. Okay. So it's like, you trusted us with so now you can trust us with COVID.
Sure.
Like
it's a big sell.
Like, hit it out of the park.
What was the first company to get it to market? It wasn't Pfizer. It was
Moderna.
Moderna.
Yeah.
That was. I just remember hearing that name a lot, and
when I did it, because I really wanted my wife to get it, and so I got Pfizer at the hospital. And then my wife got Moderna, and her reaction was not great. My reaction was fabulous. Like, I didn't really have a reaction. She had a really good, but I don't know if by having a reaction that means that you have a better antibody effect, then that's good.
What was coming to mind was back to Trevor's question. Wasn't there already a COVID vaccine that we had earlier on? Isn't that why they got it to market sooner?
I don't know. That's a great question. And then maybe they were just making little changes.
That's what I was remembering. Something, some illness from before. There was, the COV, and then whatever this one was, they were able to just add something on.
SARS-CoV-1. Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
SARS, yeah. That's right. There was something like it was China before. I remember
sitting in
that.
the back, like like some fries we had before, and now you just have to add the hot pepper sauce
to make it good. To make it good. Yeah, COVID was a trip, but and then getting back to like measles, mumps, rubella, polio.
Oh, bad stuff.
I remember there was this one. I remember this. It's really interesting. I saw this one ad. It was like in a magazine. Okay, for our younger viewers, a magazine is like something that you print. And you look at it.
No one knows. That's funny.
But basically, I was looking at this magazine, and it was talking about, vaccines. I don't know which one, but it wasn't COVID. It was way back, and it said, we still are very proud of our vaccines. What our recipients choose to do with it is at their discretion, right? And basically, it has that on the bottom, and then the top picture is basically all these guys that are anti-vax, right? So it's like an adult who's anti-vax, but thank God he didn't get measles, mumps, rubella, polio, whatever. But now he's like this good functioning adult, and what he chooses to do with his resources is his prerogative. But it was just kind of funny. It really drove the point home for me that these, for example, I remember there were these shirts that would say, I'm unvaccinated and I'm uncut and I'm looking for love or something like that.
Looking for a match.
Yeah. So just interesting times. But yeah, I'm if you see a child with measles, or the pneumonia that comes as a result of measles, or if you ever see a kid with smallpox, you'll know. For example, my dad, we got chickenpox. Us children got chickenpox. So we got chickenpox. The kids got chickenpox. And when you're a child, you get the skin manifestations. But then when you're older, you can get varicella pneumonia. And so when my dad had never had it. And so when he got it, he was at risk of getting pneumonia. Now, our kids don't even get chickenpox. They get the
vaccine.
Yeah.
Right? They have a vaccine.
Yeah.
Which I think I got because I don't believe I ever had chickenpox.
Really?
Although I think my mom said I may have had a 1 or a 2.
Yeah.
But then I went and got vaccinated later on just due to the implications if you get it when you're older.
Uh-huh.
So that's interesting.
Well,
that vaccine.
To give you an idea, and I know no religion, but like I had to check my titers, okay? Because there was somebody who came to the hospital who had varicella. So, there are all these young nurses or young docs who are like, oh no, if you got it, then you got to get whatever. And so I said, well, I had it. And they're like, well, you have to prove it to us. Right. So I actually got titers, and I had it when I was 3, okay? And when they checked my titers were off the chart. From 3 years old, I've had like your own response. Maybe getting back to your point, Trevor, like if you never got, sorry, I didn't even say, are you okay with me saying your vaccination status?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So if you never got vaccinated, if we checked your COVID titers, your titers are probably awesome. Probably better than mine because I got vaccinated. Natural immunity is still, quite frankly, the best. It's just like with any infection. When you start fighting an infection, you can die from your response to it.
And what are titers exactly?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Titers are when you check, like if you check, let's just say varicella. So varicella is the fancy name for chickenpox. If you check my titers, then that will tell you how much antibody I've produced against the chickenpox virus. So if you checked my titers because I had it as a child, my titers are off. Let's just say top normal is 100. I don't know what it is. Mine are like 50,000. Like it's ridiculous, right? But if you got titers on a person who got the vaccine, who didn't have it naturally before, then their titers may be, say, right at around 100 or something. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like your natural immunity will always be better than a vaccinated response.
And is there any anti-aging that we could tie to that? I was hearing some things
About anti-aging and what?
titers, or could someone be using vaccines to anti-age? Is there anything tied to that?
Not that I know of. Have you? I have not heard of anything like that. That's is there something out there?
I was just hearing some of the anti-aging lingo.
Yeah.
When you were talking.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if there was anything. I know when you just talked about that herd immunity is really the best for the system. So maybe somebody trying to live forever wants to herd immunity.
I think, I got the glycan age, and my glycan age was awesome. The guy when I was at that conference, maybe you have a point. Okay. So he had his glycan age, right? And then whatever it was pretty steady. And then his glycan age went up real precipitously. And then it came back down, but it never came back down to baseline. And he was wondering why that was. And it was totally COVID. So I don't know if there's anything to that. That might have just been a one-off. So let's just say he is, to make this easier for the audience, let's just say his age is 50. And he's checking his glycan age, and his glycan age says that he's 40. He gets COVID, his glycan age goes up to 70. And then when it comes back down, it doesn't come back down to the baseline of 40. It stays at like 50 or 60. That happened to him. Now, I don't know if you could extrapolate that to, the population.
That's what I was just thinking too, that with the anti-aging, if you're doing it the right way, you're going to have a very good immune system, which maybe could be related.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Just your, they call it inflammaging. So my inflammaging is awesome.
Really?
Yeah. That's the one that I got
great.
that showed my age to be like half. So whatever it may be, whatever I'm doing is, they call it inflammaging, which is inflammation and aging. So when you have a high degree of inflammation, say if you have asthma and I don't mean like you have asthma and it's well controlled. I mean, if you have asthma and it's not well controlled, then you're constantly in a state of inflammation, which means that if you're constantly in a state of inflammation, what that means is your body is constantly trying to fight something. And that process over years and years causes aging.
And is that, since we're talking inflammation, people with the milk, the lactose, is that, how does that play into inflammation?
Great question. I don't know if I'm lucky or not, but I can't drink milk. So whenever I do, if I have ice cream or whatever,
Probably
I got to take
lucky.
a Lactaid.
Lactaid. I was just talking about this. There's a chew or something.
Yeah, I just take a tablet.
Right.
And so if you think about it when we were younger, right? Or like the milk that's really awesome. Remember the milk that comes in the bottle from the milkman? That stuff was like...
That is very good.
Right? So that has a really high fat content.
Oh.
And, you'd give it to a baby, and the baby would drink it, and the baby would go to sleep. Or, have a glass of milk before you go to sleep, right? So I don't love that. I know it was out there, but the baby's sleeping, but the baby is probably sleeping because it's mounting a response and it needs to sleep. Kind of like if you're really sick and you need rest. It's kind of one of those things. Like, I'm not anti-milk, but what I'm saying is there is definitely inflammation. For somebody like me who's lactose intolerant, it's a no-brainer. But I would even say cow's milk, I think, causes inflammation for the great majority of people.
Whenever I drink milk, I don't feel that great after.
You don't? Your derivation is what? Like, you're like Northern European, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So the people in like Northern Europe, Finland, blah blah blah, those guys, they're good. They're fabulous with
not much lactose. I hear from that population, right?
No, what I'm saying is they actually can, because they're constantly surrounded by cows and cheese and all that. So they're actually good at metabolizing it. And like Like, for example, I'm the only one in my family who can't tolerate lactose. So, like, my kids, they're good with it. Leah's obviously good with it. And I think it has to do with derivations. Like, usually the Northern Europeans have a better metabolism of lactose.
I've heard that. Yeah, I could relate with that. I usually I don't have any digestion problems, but I sure do feel very dry, kind of dry, inflamed. Once I consume maybe like a bowl of cereal or something.
Yes. Oh man. Or like, I don't know if this has to do with inflammation, but for me, if after you've had ice cream, you really need to drink water.
Oh,
And I don't know if that has to do with inflammation or just the fact that you need water to digest anything. So, like, for example, here's a tip if you're ever stuck out in the desert, right? If you're stuck out in the desert and you have a candy bar and you have like a bottle of water, don't eat the candy bar. Because if you eat the candy bar in order to digest it, you're going to need that whole bottle of water. So just water is super important. Like, sip on the water. So to digest anything needs water.
ice cream. It's that's a whole nother episode.
I know. We all love ice cream.
Oh,
me too. Me included. So
Very good. Trevor, you have something else?
Yeah, I would say like maybe we get back just to kind of tie everything back to the vaccine overview of the episode. When you guys are treating non-vaccinated patients, is there a big difference, or like just what does a world without vaccines look like from both of your perspectives, being in the medical field?
So the question was somebody's unvaccinated. How do you treat them? So what I do is it's really interesting. That one patient I was talking about at the very beginning, I just gave her steroids because they were okay with steroids, which was the treatment for COVID, but they didn't want the COVID vaccine and they didn't want what was called remdesivir. And, there was some craziness,
I remember that one.
I forget what antifungal vermectin or
Ivermectin.
Ivermectin, yeah.
Ivermectin.
So I don't recommend ivermectin.
So,
I don't mind going on TV saying that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good with no ivermectin.
And some people say that worked for them, right? Yeah. They went and found ivermectin.
I'm not sure how, but maybe it did.
And I have no idea even what it is.
But how I would treat, so it's a lot. So we're a lot less scared now, I guess. Somebody who comes in now who doesn't want the COVID vaccine, that's fine because we're so good at treating it now, and that patient might have benefited from herd immunity, meaning the COVID that did get through is such a less. Because if you think about it, if there's herd immunity, what happens is the people that get really sick, they're kind of like tagged, like you're sick, stay away from me. The people that are not tagged are the people who are asymptomatic, which is probably the less virulent kind. And the less virulent kind is what people ultimately get, right? So now if I have somebody who's unvaccinated, you just treat them like anything else. Like, for example, there are patients that have religious preferences where they don't want blood products. Those patients do come in and they are actively bleeding and you need to give them blood and they say no and you document it and you're good. As far as what were your thoughts on that? Because I want to get to your next question too.
Well, I liked what he was talking about. What does the world look like without vaccine?
Yeah.
And I was immediately thinking of the Night of the Living Dead. Zombies walking around, limbs missing. And now I know that wouldn't be the case all the way. But there are some nasty illnesses. You mentioned polio. And so without a vaccine of that, I could, now I think I was going a little too far there, but I think you could see some disruption. What do you think, Doc?
A world without vaccines? Oh my God. We are so blessed to have vaccines. I'll give you an example. When I treat some older patients and they can't move their one leg, right? Or their leg is all like small and atrophied because they haven't been using it, it's from polio. And it was just a thing. Like, oh yeah, this kid got polio and he can't use his right leg. I don't know if that's what Forrest Gump had. Remember that movie
I do.
I forget if he had polio.
One of the best.
But I have had multiple patients came in. They couldn't move whatever leg. They use a crutch for their whole life, and it's just like, oh yeah, I got polio when I was a kid. Or smallpox. We are so lucky we don't have smallpox in this country, but it exists elsewhere. Or let's even get to, there's not a vaccine, but just antibiotics. Let's talk biblical. Leprosy.
Oh, yeah.
Couple of cents of antibiotics. Imagine, like, they talk about leprosy in very, very old books. And now it's just a matter of doing a couple of dollars worth, or probably a couple of cents worth of antibiotics. So I'm very, very, we're so blessed to be living in this time where we have access to antibiotics and vaccines. Even like the richest, most, what's the word I'm looking for here? Most affluent kings and queens of previous, right? They could not live in a better world than we do with vaccines. And have you seen this thing with Kevin Costner, the TV show that, the 1923, or, you know what I'm talking about? Yellowstone.
I've heard of that.
Okay.
I haven't, I think I saw it briefly.
Well, basically, there's this other show. I don't know if it's 1883. It was one of the previous shows. It's like a prequel because that's what Yellowstone did so well. And basically, and I know we're kind of veering off. It's not vaccines, it's antibiotics. But like, it was just a given. Like, you got an infection, you died. It was a given. Like,
wow.
The main well, I don't know if I want. I'll give it a little bit away. The main character gets shot with an arrow. And it goes into her liver, and they're like, oh, well, if the infection doesn't kill you now, it's going to kill you in 3 days. And they didn't have antibiotics. It was just a given. And even so much so that some of the people would dip their arrows into poop because they knew that would give you the sepsis or the infection. Wow. So it was just a given.
Interesting.
Just so crazy how lucky we are. Or even let's talk about really like not dumb, but like a cartoon. Have you ever seen the Croods? The
No.
Croods are like those. It's like a family of like
cavemen, right?
That's right. That's right.
When Nicolas Cage was
When
the voice
Nicolas
of one.
Cage was the dad.
Nicolas
exactly.
Cage.
That's exactly the one.
Great actor.
He lives in Vegas, right?
I think so.
Yeah. And so they have this thing at the beginning where they're talking about like these families, right? And one, families are either eaten by like a tiger, and then there was this one where like the family or like the child gets bit by like a mosquito and just done. Like you're just done, right? Now, have you ever like just tried to work through an infection, like a cold?
I was just thinking of that. I've tried to beat things on my own, and it never works out.
I have done it also, and I try my best to beat it. And I think probably around day 14 is where I say, kind of similar to what we're asking here. So basically, if the disease is going to last for, let's just say it's rhinovirus or flu, for example.
Okay.
If it's going to last 30 days, right? Like just imagine this, okay? I can either take an antibiotic for something. Either way, you're going to beat it in 14 days, maybe 10 to 14 days, or you're not going to beat it and you're going to have the whole sickness for 30 days. Right. For me, what I say is once I reach day 14, I'm like, you know what, man? Like, I know that if I had taken the antibiotic, I'd probably be over it by now, but I want to give my body a chance to do it. But by day 14, if I'm not over it, I'm taking the risk that is involved with taking any antibiotic just so that I don't have the disease for another 15 days, which I feel is justified because then I'm better at work. I can work out. I'm better with my family. I'm not like all pissed off because I have a fever.
Right.
Have you ever had a bad fever?
Oh my goodness! I was gonna say you're tough, and we've talked when we've been sick.
Yeah.
And I'm the patient that comes to you at day 3 or 5, because I just want to get back to work. I want to get back to functionality.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel good with doctors. Like they say, hey, take this.
Yeah.
And it disappears.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been my experience. So I'm like a pro doctor, get me to the quick care.
Yeah, just get it treated. I mean, honestly, we're so lucky to have these tools. You can overuse them. There is something where they, especially in the hospital, they're using antibiotics too much. They're using strong antibiotics too much. Where, you know how we're talking about horses and ivermectin?
Yeah.
There are people that have such serious infections now that they have to use these antibiotics that what they were using on horses, and they've brought them to humans because it's the only thing left that will treat the infection. So there is something, they call it antibiotic stewardship, where you are a steward and you say, listen, you don't need to use, there's a fly. You don't need a shotgun to kill this fly. You need a fly swatter.
Right.
And so the fly swatter is basically an antibiotic that's not so fancy. It's maybe like a really old antibiotic that you can use to treat the infection, as opposed to something like really big, like a really new antibiotic that you can use that will just annihilate it. But what happens is because the bugs always win, okay? There's a reason why COVID will, I hate to say this, but there will be, whether it's COVID or another virus, there will be another pandemic. I don't know when, but there will be another pandemic. The bacteria are always either, I'm not trying to cause any sort of hysteria, but like basically there's an antibiotic drift and then there's an antibiotic shift. So let me give you an example. If influenza, right? Influenza is just a drift and then we get the vaccine, right? But if influenza does a shift, no vaccine that we make for it is going to work.
Wow.
So then we'll be in a COVID-like situation. The difference is that influenza is much easier to spread.
Oh
yeah. Pretty crazy.
Really?
Pretty crazy. We will not have enough ventilators. Same thing. We won't have enough ventilators. We won't have enough hospital beds. We won't have enough healthcare providers. So it's really, we just kind of handle things as we go. And the one thing about technology, we're talking about technology, antibiotics, vaccines, right? It's all technology based. The one bad thing about technology is travel, right? Like, have you guys ever seen Planet of the Apes?
I have.
That whole decimation occurred with that pilot, right? Well, now we're so interconnected, right? Where did the Spanish flu stop? I don't know. Probably where the ship stopped, right? But if they had planes in that time, forget about it. Let's just say, I forget. Let's just say the Spanish flu was in Spain. And then you could fly over to Las Vegas. I don't know if Las Vegas existed at that time. Somewhere in the States, right? If you flew over at that time, you could give it to all the people there and to all the people on the plane. So that's the one drawback with technology, is that the world is so small now. Yeah.
The thing I was thinking, I remember always going in and requesting or thinking the Z-Pack, the zithromycin, was the cure of all. So do you feel that one was overused in the last 10 years probably?
Very good question. Z-Pack is azithromycin, you're right. And it's used to treat atypical. So if you come in and you have an infection, it treats the atypical bacteria like Mycoplasma, Legionella, Chlamydia, et cetera. So we were using it a lot because if you had something in the community, those are usually the bugs that affect you. Now, at the hospital, for example, so then the other thing was, if you come in with pneumonia, you get Rocephin azithromycin, which is Z-Pack, right? But now what they're finding is that the bugs have gotten smart because they get smart, and there's not a great incidence of azithromycin working now for certain bacteria. Which all that means is that we just got to change it. So, for example, instead of Rocephin azithromycin, personally, I always use Rocephin doxycycline. Oh. So, but the bacteria could get smart to doxycycline, at which time they'll do what's called an antibiogram, and they look at the actual community, and they say, hey, there's not a great incidence of azithromycin working in the community for atypical pathogens, which cause like the walking pneumonia or whatever. So yeah, it's out there. Oh yeah. So Z-Pack doesn't work great anymore.
And it's interesting you say that because I had a strep throat not too long ago, or no, this was probably about a year ago.
Yeah.
And I went in excited, hey, give me the Z-Pack.
Yeah.
And it went away and then came back.
Interesting.
So I went back in, and I want to say they used Rocephin.
Okay.
It was the same.
Like a shot?
No shot.
Okay.
It was the pills.
Pills, okay.
Medication, and it really wiped it out.
Maybe so. Rocephin's a shot. They can do Ceftonir, which is kind of like Rocephin.
Maybe.
And there's also Augmentin. Augmentin is like if you came to me and Z-Pack didn't work, I'd try Augmentin. Augmentin is like ampicillin. Augmentin is amoxicillin clavulanate. So we not only are so again, no mass hysteria. The bugs are smart, but we're also smart.
Right.
So there's this thing called Augmentin, where it's ampicillin, but the bacteria make these things called penicillin binding proteins, and they poke holes into the penicillin so that it's not effective. And then you have ampicillin sulbactam, and that's ampicillin clavulanic acid, and the clavulanate works against those bacteria that are making the penicillin binding proteins. So it's just like this constant like
Chemist.
yeah, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do this. It's kind of like no one will remember this, but like the Cold War, or not Cold War, like remember Star Wars between Russia and the US? So like no one who's listening to this is going to remember this, but basically, in the event of like like nuclear bombs, right? Each country was like, oh, they're going to send this nuclear bomb, and then we have these Star Wars things that will go and like basically take out the nuclear warhead. And then the other country would be like, okay, that thing that takes out the nuclear warhead, we're going to have something that attacks that.
Wow.
Do you guys remember that? You certainly don't.
I think I remember that with Star Wars. And
Yeah.
that kind of.
It's
that
like,
piece
we're talking
of
about
it.
like Reagan and Gorbachev and yeah, like when I was really little.
Yeah, and myself, I'm allergic to penicillin and sulfa.
Oh, okay.
So I know when I see the doctors, I'm kind of limited.
Oh, so they probably didn't give you Augmentin then.
Yeah.
To your point.
But I just, it was funny to me that Z-Pack was no longer this huge power punch.
Yeah. The bacteria, yeah.
Very
Anything you use a lot of, which kind of, I guess, is kind of an argument for vaccines. Like if you keep getting vaccinated with COVID, right? Is like, are you not giving your body the chance to make natural antibodies? Which is that's a valid point, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
One thing to wrap up this episode is an argument that I see pop up a lot for people that are against vaccinating their children, especially, are the supposed links to autism, even though you can do a quick Google search and see that there are many different studies that have tested children of different ethnicities, different demographics, and there doesn't seem to be a link. And I'm just curious, where do you think that belief came from, and how did it become linked to autism? Because there is a big rise in autism. In the last 20 years, it did go from roughly 1 in 150 children being autistic to 1 in 36 as of recently. So just wondering if you think there could be any link with the vaccines, or where that belief came from in general, since the studies show almost the opposite.
So this is actually one that I have a pretty, I don't want to be political, but I really, there was a celebrity. So this is kind of like what happens with like celebrities. It was a celebrity, and she's good looking. And I think it was Jenny McCarthy, and she had a child with autism. I don't know whether the autism was related to a vaccine or not. I couldn't speak to that. But this kind of gets back to what we talked about before, is that you have somebody here who's attractive, who's very well known, and what happens is the person who sees that is like, oh, well, I'm not going to, you're a parent. You don't want to do something bad to your child, which really underscores the need for research, right? So if you have somebody who really likes Jenny McCarthy, I really like Jenny McCarthy. I mean, I think she's beautiful. However, I don't agree with her on this. I'm sorry that maybe her child got autism from the vaccine. The rate of people getting autism from vaccines is either low or negligible. So kind of gets back to what we talked about before, is if there's an incidence of 1 in, let me even make the numbers even simpler. What's the population in the US? 300 million, 500 million?
It's like between
million?
350 and 400, somewhere around there.
So let's just say 400 million, okay? And let's just say, I don't know, but let's just say the incidence of getting autism from a vaccine is 1 in a million, okay? They won't even quote that to you, but let's just say it's 1 in a million. And let's just say 400 people get it in the US, 400 children, right? That is terrible. And the incidence for that family is 100%. But if you take 400 and you divide it by 400 million, it's a very small segment of the population. And your risk when you go into this is very small. So my opinion on that is that if these people would see what happens when their child gets measles or gets mumps or rubella or whatever, I think they would be better with the risk of the vaccine. Kind of like when I take antibiotics, right? Like I know the risks of antibiotics. Like you can get really bad diarrhea, you can get a resistant infection, the whole 9, right? But you have to make a decision. Every decision in our lives is risk benefit, right? Like you get into when we got into our cars to come here today, there's a risk that we could get into an accident. Sure. Versus the benefit of filming this awesome show where everybody benefits, right? So
right.
We're constantly doing risk benefit analysis, and the risk benefit analysis for vaccines I think is still better benefit. And as far as autism, I think that was a real disservice to a lot of, not knocking the parents, but that was a disservice to the common person about vaccines. If you ever see a child with measles, mumps, rubella, polio, or even in like the third world, if you see a kid with smallpox, there's no question in my mind anyway.
Very good, Doc. This is way above my pay grade, so we appreciated the response.
Oh, you're very welcome. I hope I didn't come off too
I thought it was great.
Go.
Well, it's been a big pleasure as always seeing you,
Mike.
Doc, and conversing back and forth. I always learn a lot, so I wanted to say thank you for coming today.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. I'm always here, so just let me know, and whatever is like burning in the community, whatever they want to talk about, I'm all, because I know when I was a kid, I always want to know what doctors thought about certain things. So.